From healing to high performance, this is the Warriors Ascent podcast. This episode is brought to you by Torch AI, unlocking human potential.
Well, all right. Welcome to the Warriors Ascent podcast, season 5.
Season 5.
With your hosts, Mike and Matt. So glad you've all stuck with us. We took a little bit of a hiatus, but hey, man, good things come to those who wait, so they say, right? Yeah. All right, so this first episode, we're just going to kind of set the stage for, I'll say, the thematics of what it is that we really want to cover this season. And there might be some departures here or there based on, I'll say, guest availability and all of that stuff. But I think it's crucial that we just kind of set the stage for what it is we want to do. So, Matt and I were talking about what it is that we want to focus on. And I think some of the keys are, network of relationships, right? And what is it that they say? If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. I think that's it, right? Or at least, hey, go with a partner, go with a group. But I'll say this, I've come to find over the years that surrounding yourself with good people who have your best interest in mind, people that you respect, people that I'll say there's a degree of ideological and philosophical alignment is absolutely critical. And when you surround yourselves with people like that, you can't help but just be a better person. I'll say have a better life. Things are just so much easier. When you surround yourself with toxic people that don't have your best interest in mind, that clearly that'll take a deleterious, or have a deleterious effect on your psychological and emotional well-being. So with that said, Matt, what are your thoughts in terms of what constitutes, a network of good relationships in your mind?
Well, one, I wanted to say, did you notice we're in a different place?
That's right.
We jumped over to our office, the headquarters, the worldwide headquarters of Warriors Ascent, and our partners at KC Podcast Studios are here, jumping in to set us up for this mobile version of our podcast. And without a relationship and a network, you can't really be a strong, thriving organization, especially one that's out there seeking to help a population that's struggling through PTSD and other problems through their service to our nation and to our people. So, of course, we need help doing that from all walks of life. And one of them is just awareness. So that's what we're doing here. So I'm happy to find partners everywhere we can find them. We started out with thinking about talking to board of directors members because they're coming from all sorts of professions to jump on board to help us with our mission. And we're going to, branch out to other network people as well,
absolutely,
sponsors,
brother.
Donors.
Yeah. So we'll talk to board members, again, supporters, partners, everyone that's, I'll say, helped this organization in specific. But hey, we can speak to, partners and supporters in general, throughout our lives as well, and what made them so instrumental. So, we'll do a deep dive on your partnership in a subsequent episode. I'm looking forward to that, wherein, we can really highlight, hey, what is it that you brought? What is it that brought you to us, and why it is that you feel so compelled to really put your shoulder behind this organization in so many different ways. We're super grateful to have you, but, so that'll be an interesting conversation, but setting the stage for that conversation and, more to come beyond that is, again, that ideological alignment. What is it with a good supportive network that I'll just say makes people jive with one another. And I'll set the stage a little bit, and we can, we can go into more detail. But when you're with people that have, I'll say, similar values, value the same things, that look at things. I mean, again, you don't want an echo chamber. You want diversity of perspectives, absolutely, but I think there really needs to be, again, that alignment, where you value things similarly. You've got, I'll say, similar philosophies. You're all, I'll say, marching in the right direction, the same direction. So I mean, what are your thoughts, in terms of, let's just speak in generalities, the people that you've found to be most helpful in your life, or even, for this organization, what is it about what it is that they value, their ethos, their ethic?
Yeah, they're living a way, they live in a manner in which is showing productive outcomes or positive outcomes. They're not complaining. They're not being negative all the time. They're looking at a situation that might be negative and figuring out a way to change it in some way that they can attack it, so they can live with it, so they can bypass it, whatever they need to do. But the one thing they're not going to do is give up. So there's resiliency in the fact that, like, I'm not going to give up. And just the ability to think more positive all the time, I think is something you can learn through practice. And, it's not going to happen if you're hanging around people that are being toxic or negative. So, I mean, that's the thing that helps me the most is let's get involved with people, one, that really want to help other people too. Because people that are given to something that's bigger than themselves usually are worth being around, because they usually fit that criteria of being positive and trying to figure out a way to make things happen. I like people who come with solutions, not just problems. That was the thing, as being a warrant officer in the U.S. Army was, if you're going to complain about something, you better have one or two solutions, or don't even bring it up. That was quickly learned. So, I mean, I bring up solutions all the time that may not be viable solutions, but I at least try to figure something out.
No, I love it, brother. Absolutely. The naysayer, devil's advocate, whatever it might be. Yeah, we've all seen them, and there's a place for that. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think.
But very much to your point, if you're going to bring a problem to the forefront and say, "Hey, I see this as an issue," or "Hey, the course of action that we're embarking on is fraught with peril, and here's why." Okay, great. Be prepared to say, "Here's why, and here's what I think we can do about it," or "Here's a course of action that's going to remedy or rectify that."
Yeah.
Versus the person that's just, everything sucks, this isn't right.
Let's just curl up in a corner and die.
Right. No, absolutely.
Those people exist, and you see them, and I'm not going to stomp on them or anything, but I'm just going to move on to another spot.
Yeah, and just someone more positive. So again, keeping it, in generalities, and then we can, I'll say, do the specifics with each individual and kind of find out, hey, their why, what it is about our organization and their role in it that appeals to them, et cetera, et cetera. I'll say overall, kind of almost like at the meta level, right? I think this organization attracts, at least kind of what we're looking for, but I think it happens organically, people that are about really what it is that we say, empowerment and ownership. Mm-hmm. So we'll kind of break that out a little bit. So we'll talk about, we empower our participants to take ownership of their lives and healing. And I think the board, our supporters, our providers, our mentors, the people that have come through the program and then help us administer that on the back end, by being exemplars of what right looks like. Mm-hmm. I think all embody that ethic and that ethos, which I believe is very, very important. So why don't we talk about that? So empowerment. What are your thoughts?
I mean, it's got being heard, like if you're in a scenario and someone gives you the keys to daddy's car, you get to go drive the car. That means they trusted me, or they're empowering me, to just take my own life in my own charge and not worry about these other things. The empowerment piece is important. I think too, that positive attitude, to know that I'm being seen, so things and people trust me, and the potential is seen inside of me to, succeed or cross the finish line, whatever that is.
No, absolutely, man. I would say, I'll throw out, it's somewhat of a double-edged sword. Empowerment, you need to be empowered. But the flip side of that is, ownership. You own it too, So empowerment, I think, is important, both from this organization and then donors, supporters, partners, funders, people that I think align very well with our mission, our vision, and how it is we go about our business, programmatically, whatever it might be in execution. I think the empowerment piece is absolutely key because it speaks to agency, right? So, in psychology, Albert Bandura, I believe, was the guy that developed the concept of self-efficacy. And self-efficacy, at least from a clinical standpoint, has more to do, as I understand it, with your belief that you can be effective versus, I am effective. And of course, being effective, there's a component of that. I mean, if you are effective and you've proven your effectiveness in the past, you tend to believe that I can be effective. Yeah. But first things being first, it's like if you have no belief in your ability to affect an outcome in your life or anywhere, you don't have that agency, and you are disempowered. And we are all about, at Warriors Ascent, empowerment, this notion that you have more control over facets of your life or your life writ large than you might believe. And that's certainly not everything, like every facet of your life, absolutely. But that empowerment stems from a belief that it is within your purview and your ability to affect at least some outcomes in your life that dictate the course of your life.
I saw it on that last graduation I just attended. It seemed to be a theme where people were, announcing, I am enough, and that seemed, I don't know what happened. I wasn't around for that whole retreat in the cohort, but the I am enough theme seemed to come out at least 5-6 times throughout that graduation. And I think that speaks to what you're saying, is that I get it now. I have agency. I believe in myself. I can move forward. Now it's time to own it, though, and it's time to get to work. And you'll start to realize, this is hard. This has got to be every day. Some days there's pitfalls. I have backwards movement sometimes, forward movement sometimes, and just sticking with it. And but still having that belief is key.
So true. So you're empowered. There's a lot of responsibility in that. So when I was a company XO in an SF company, right, as a brand new SF captain, my company sergeant major, was a former Delta guy. Everybody loved him. He looked up to him like big brother. This guy was a super stud. And one of the things he said to me early on that I never forgot, he's like, hey, so remember this above all else. He's like, to whom much is given, much is expected. And at least in the SOF community, the SF community, hey, you're entrusted with a lot. You've got a lot of responsibility, a lot of great training. The nation has entrusted you with a great many things. You've gotten the best training in the world, but in the end, you're expected to go downrange and make magic happen. So the country, the unit, the regiment, everybody, they expect a lot from you, and you'd better deliver.
Yep.
And this is very similar. Hey, you've been empowered. We're going to show you the ways in which you can be empowered, or you can empower yourself. But in the end, hey, there are people to help you. Absolutely, no man or woman is an island. But ownership, it's like you own it, man. I mean, if there's no victimhood, there's no room for that in the organization. And as we've said, clearly, bad things happen to good people. Nobody would say differently. That's just the fact of life.
That's life, yeah.
But, and I know we've that great philosopher Will Smith, right? DJ Jazzy Jeff, right? No, there was a YouTube episode or whatever you want to call it that I saw in him, and I was oddly shocked with how profound his message was. Wherein he's like, people get so fixated or they conflate fault with responsibility. And what he was saying is, hey, it's not my fault. This happened to me. It's not my fault. It's not my fault. It's not my fault. Got it. Yes, bad things happen to you. It's not your fault. Absolutely. But it's your responsibility now to kind of move beyond that, or got it. What are you going to do to rectify the situation or to deal with it or make your life better? And that's not diminishing or taking away the fact that something bad happened to you for which you may or may not have been responsible. Got it. But, it's not your fault. But it's your responsibility to take ownership then and say, all right, this is what I need to do to change things, to better my position or whatever it might be. So, empowerment and ownership, absolutely key in terms of, I'll say, our DNA and our ethic, right?
Yeah, that's true. I know that as a pilot in command of an aircraft or an air mission commander, it was the same idea, is that everything that happens is my fault. It's my responsibility. I'm accountable. I might not have been the one who was flying the aircraft. And that situation occurred to me where near crash situation, the other pilot was flying. I recognized last second that we were crashing, and I was able to grab the aircraft and save it. And it caused me a little bit of trauma, let's just say the least.
And everyone else that was in that aircraft.
Yeah, everybody in the aircraft was, how the hell did you save that? And I'm like, I think it was pure luck, maybe some divine intervention. Not sure how that happened. But, it made me real nervous and moving forward in the environment because it was in dark, dusty, zero moon, scariest stuff you could fly in.
Yeah.
And that's what we were going to live in and operate in. And so I became kind of a control freak. Nobody else was going to really touch. I had to fly with the same person a lot, and I made him, look at the ice rate meter in 120 degrees and say, "Yeah, I'll let you fly if that ice rate gets, starts covering up on ice, and maybe you got a shot." So, I was trying to get through that trauma later, and the therapist was explaining to me, "Well, you have to get rid of the fact that wasn't your fault." And it's like, you don't understand. I'll never. It'll always be my fault, because I was in charge and command. So it was kind of this battle I have, and it's like I will let go in a way so it will drop the trauma from me, but I'm not gonna. It's just a hard thing to say when you're accountable for something, and then I think for some people it's hard to let go. Maybe that's one of our problems.
I think the responsibility thing that you're getting at, again, fault versus responsibility. Hey, the aircraft goes down, you're not flying, maybe not your fault, but as the pilot in charge, I think you're saying you are ultimately responsible.
Yeah.
And the expectation, to be honest, is kind of what you did is you stepped in the nth hour, nth minute, nth second, and averted near disaster to your credit, and I think, the people are like, all right, you did your job.
Good. That's good, but
even though it's like, that's a job well done, man.
As a metaphor for life, it didn't work very good, because I was taking control of everything and trying to, be in command of all scenarios so that I could, the outcome would be the one I needed, because I'm not going to sit there and take these outcomes other people gave to me, while I was in charge. So it ended up being a burden to me, but I've kind of figured that thing out. And there's a difference, like it has to be the appropriately positioned responsibility and accountability, but so it's two things: dealing with trauma or dealing with regular life as you're moving forward out of the military or out of service or whatever the deal is.
I mean, that's a good point. Is I'll say your retrospective, your reflection, in terms of, all right, man, hey, fault versus responsibility, and then how that colors your perspective, your behavior, going forward.
Right.
And to your point, kind of being like, all right, now am I being over controlling? Nobody would blame you. You almost died, and you're like, I'm not going to let that happen again. You know, a near-death experience, I'm going to be far more vigilant, maybe almost over-controlling. I don't think anybody would blame you for that.
Well, and then there was this thing, oh, I'm an instructor and I'm a mentor and I should be training this younger person. And then I'm thinking, this is the Super Bowl every day, you know. Every day we're out here is the Super Bowl. I don't really want to play training at this point, you know, but it ends up being that way.
No, I hear you. So empowerment and ownership in terms of, I'll say, our ethos.
Yeah.
I'll throw out the other thing, you know, sharpening the saw, you know, self-care. So, you know, hey, we want agency, you know, we want responsibility, right? Absolutely. But, you know, I'll say maybe not the paradox, but for a leader in particular, this notion of self-care, you know, and taking care of yourself, as we've said in the past, is almost kind of anathema to the way it is that we do business, right? But at Warriors Ascent, yes, on one hand, we're I'll say somewhat draconian in that, hey, you've got that agency, you know, but you also have the responsibility, you own it. But also, you know, that ownership, I'll say in large measure, relates to, you know, the self-care piece, you know, and we've thrown out the example of, you know, preventative maintenance, checks and services, which for an aviator, I know you know all too well, because if you don't do that, an aircraft falls out of the sky. But much like an aircraft where you've got to service that aircraft to make sure that it's running and it's, you know, FOC, right? Or I'm sorry, FMC, fully mission capable.
Yep.
Your body's no different, right? So if you're not doing your self-care, if you're not doing your preventative maintenance checks and services, kind of our, you know, holistic approach to that, some of the self-care practices we teach at Warriors Ascent, in addition to, you know, the I'll call it the metacognitive stuff, the cognitive behavioral therapy and all that stuff. If you're not, I'll say, embracing that notion that you've got to take care of yourself and reset, and that is not being frivolous or overindulgent, that is just part of being, I'll say, a high performer.
Yeah.
You're missing the boat.
Or even just performing at all.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's a must.
No, absolutely. Yeah. So in terms of, I'll say, the philosophy, you know, behind what it is that we do, I mean, I think that notion that you've got to, you know, that taking care of yourself is not, again, being overindulgent. And, you know, I'll throw this out to you. It's like, I know you had said to us, and again, we'll do an interview with you you know, subsequently. But I know one of the things that you said, like a lot of leaders do, is, well, there's somebody more needful than myself that should avail themselves of this program. I don't want to take somebody else's slot.
Right.
But, you know, I think one of the things that's absolutely critical is this notion that, men, if you're not showing up as your best self, you are not doing anyone a service.
It's totally true. I had that same thing happen where I kept getting that told to me, you know, oh, they tell you on the airline to put your mask on before somebody else. And I would just say, okay, here we go with that again. You know, that's just what a selfish person would say to a person who's going to get the job done. You know, you sit down, I'll make the stuff happen. I'll rescue everybody. And then you can tell me, you know, after action, how poorly I did. You know, that's how I think about it. And, you know, now it's obviously not the case. As you advance in age and things, you know, things start hurting more, and you eat better, you sleep better, you exercise the right way. You have to kind of admit that you're older and try to quit exercising like you might have in your 30s. However, I mean, all that stuff starts actually being positive, which helps your, you know, mental attitude. And then you work on that too, and you just start moving in the right direction. And as that momentum gains, it's just easy to keep gaining. You know, it just is. The momentum's a little bit tough to start, and we see that all the time. But once it gets going, it gets going. So
No, absolutely. Once you get put on the path, the challenge is to stay on the path.
Yeah, it is.
Right. And that's the hard part. And I think for our part, we try our level best to keep people on the path. So in terms of a network of support, there are people that keep us, on the path,
right,
and keep us viable, which we appreciate, no doubt, our supporters, partners, donors, funders, you name it. But then for our part, taking the resources that they're generous enough to give us, we do our level best to make sure that when people come to us and we give them the tools for healing, that we as a community, we as an organization, keep them on the path as well. And this podcast is I'll say, part of that. Mm-hmm. So, we hope that these episodes are always relevant and germane to your healing journey. So we are glad that everybody's here with us this season. And we're hoping that, we can tee up some concepts that, again, are actionable, useful, and then have some, cool color commentary that at least it takes that abstract, the abstractions and make them concrete. So it'll be good. So tune in next time. Appreciate you all having the patience. Season 5, and we will see you next episode.
Come back for more. Thanks.
Thanks for watching this episode of the Warriors Ascent podcast. We're in Kansas City helping veterans and first responders with PTS. Check us out at warriorsascent.org.